Thanks for joining us for a very special edition of the IEA Reporter podcast as we visit with longtime IEA member Cindy Wilson, who's running for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Election day is November 6th, but early voting is available in many Idaho counties already. Cindy, you've been a very active member both in the IEA and in your local associations where you've been a teacher. How has your membership shaped your philosophies around education and your platform in this superintendent's race?
You know, I got involved in the association when I very first joined in my first year of teaching. And since 1984, I have found that we have to participate. We have to participate in the process. You know, sometimes I hear educators say, I don't really like politics. You know, my job, I don't want it to be political. But the realization that I've had in all of these years of membership is our jobs are political. And here's why. The actual definition of politics is the distribution of resources. So that's what we're looking at, and that's what we are advocating, is that the proper resources go to meet the needs of our students and also what we are trying to do in the classroom. It's extremely important that teachers all across this state, that classified staff, that everyone who's involved in the education of our children be a part of that solution of what does the Idaho budget pie look like? Where do the dollars go? Are we creating needs-based budgets? And by doing that, we can do what's best for kids. And that's always at the top of the IEA's mantra is, what are we going to do that's best for our kids?
So you as a member and now as a candidate have run into some of the same things that we do with the IEA, and that is we run into members and professional educators who say, I'm just a teacher, and completely focus on classroom. And that is, without a doubt, their primary focus. But you have learned over the years that there's more to it than that.
Oh, absolutely. And I agree. That should be our primary focus. But our children really benefit when we participate, when we write to our legislators, when we ensure that we're out promoting the best candidates. I don't care if it's for a school board or for a legislative district or a statewide election. We need to be strong advocates for education supporters because it's proven that our communities look to teachers to hear what they have to say. And we can be role models in supporting those folks who are going to support our kids.
Spoken like a civics teacher. Your teaching background includes work in different parts of the state, large and small districts. How does that help you if you're elected, and what should we know as IEA members and as potential voters about the differences between districts around the state?
Today, every child's education is determined by their zip code, and it's different depending on where you live in this state. And I know that because I've taught in one of the smallest schools in the state, a medium-sized school in the state, and the two largest districts in the state. And the education is not equitable. Not only is that unfair to Idaho children, it's also unconstitutional. So we need to take a hard look at ensuring that the funding is equitable statewide. Now, how do we make that happen? I just this morning was sitting in on the funding formula meeting. And I want to ensure that every district is held harmless on having a decrease of funding from that meeting. But the other issue is we've come to rely on supplemental levies. Mm-hmm. If you're fortunate enough to live in a district that can pass those levies, then you have extraordinary funding beyond what the state is providing. What if you don't? What if you're in a district that does not have that same tax base to be able to support that? You're hurting because they're not supplemental levies. They are levies just to keep those doors open. So we're seeing programs cut, and that should never happen for our kids.
Let's talk about teacher compensation and the retention problem that's facing Idaho. We've had the career ladder, multiple studies on the issues that we have recruiting and retaining teachers. Where do we stand now, and what approach would you take to addressing this, what's obviously a very important issue?
People need to realize we have a problem in this state. We're losing great teachers, and we are not being able to always recruit great teachers because of our funding. And that's the number one issue. When I served on the governor's task force and we talked about the career ladder, it was meant to be able to recruit and retain great teachers. But if you live in North Idaho, in the Panhandle, today you can cross the state line and go into Washington and earn $20,000 to $30,000 more a year, and you get a subsidy for your national board certification. The same is true in southeastern Idaho. If you cross over the border and go into Wyoming, I'm not as specific on the dollar amounts there, but we're losing great teachers. Fortunately, we still have some fantastic people who are staying in our state, but a lot of people are starting to retire. That was our large pool of folks, and we're not getting people coming into the profession. We need to look at our salary schedule and make sure it's comparable with other states and other professions for the education that we require.
The Teacher Pipeline Work Group issued a number of recommendations, one of which certainly was based around compensation, but there were others about rural schools and various other things. How do you, if you're in the role of superintendent, activate some of those recommendations? How do you get the legislature to move, or the state board or the State Department to move forward on these things?
Yes, and I have a couple of other ideas about how to get teachers into our rural districts, because I've been hearing these stories as I've traveled across the state all summer long. And these local rural districts are really hurting. What we have to do is tell that story. We need to get that Burley superintendent talking to folks in his community and letting them know that at the beginning of the school year, they had 4 openings still available in their district, that there are other school districts that have dropped music programs, that have dropped PE programs because they don't have a teacher that's available to teach in that. So we can look at some possibilities of creating maybe some loan repayment if a teacher is willing to go into a rural district and work there for a certain number of years, similar to what the medical profession does. We can also look at providing scholarships. You know, we have some of the best paraprofessionals in the nation working in Idaho. Some of them want to become teachers, but they can't really afford to do that on their salary. Let's make that possible for them.
One of the complaints we often hear is that education policy is crafted by people that really don't have much experience in a classroom or in a school building. How would you ensure that the voices of professional educators are heard on these important policy decisions?
Absolutely. Teachers should be the voice for kids, the number one voice for kids. But we've had a vacuum of leadership in our state. This is actually one of the reasons that made me want to run for this office. Because when you have that vacuum, and there is a void, and the head of the Department of Education is not standing up and speaking out for teachers and kids, we have policymakers who come in and they start pushing their own agenda, but they don't have the expertise in education that our trained professionals do. We need to take that back to be that voice, and that's what I hope to do for Idaho teachers.
Let's take that a step further and then talk about that process, or about the challenges and opportunities that you envision you will have in terms of working with legislators and working with the state Board of Education and with the education stakeholder groups, some of which may be receptive to your ideas and others you may get pushback from.
Relationships. You know, this is something I've been working on my entire life, because that's what pushes things. That's what makes them happen. And that's what happens in education. You have a student-teacher relationship, you have a teacher-principal relationship, and so on. You have to have a relationship with legislators. I've already been working on that. I've been talking to legislators all across the state throughout the summer, and I've had a relationship with them previously because of the other work that I've been doing on the Board of Correction. So I am establishing relationships even as we speak. I know how important that is. And the state board members, I've also been reaching out to them and talking to them about what we could do together to move Idaho's education into this century, because we are lagging behind all of these other states. It's time for us to come together and then work for Idaho kids.
Let's hit on a couple of other things, one of which sort of ties in, and that's Idaho has experienced essentially stagnant graduation rates and made very little progress on those go-on rates, or the percentage of the young adults, the 60% goal we've heard a lot about, that are getting some form of post-secondary education. What can we do to improve in those areas? Yes,
absolutely. First, we have to understand why 60%. It's an established goal that will improve the economy of our state. That's research tells us that. That's why we have to hit that 60% mark, and we're not close to that yet. We're in the 40s. So we've done a good job from the governor's task force, which I served on, in putting together the advanced opportunities credits. However, why didn't we do a better job of looking at vocational technical programs and trade programs? How can we provide opportunity to reach that kind of money for those students who may not be going on to college? Can we help provide them with some internship money, or maybe some money to help the books or courses in the evening, or whatever it is that they need to do to become an electrician, to become a plumber, to become a certified construction worker? Let's take a look at the trade programs and really start to move those other kids forward. And because we don't have a good balance in that right now, we can do a lot better.
School safety is clearly a major concern, topic of interest in this race too. What steps would you propose to ensure that the students and the professional educators too, for that matter, anybody that's in a school building, that they're teaching and learning in safe spaces?
We have to focus on prevention. If we don't, it's already too late. And think about this. These are our students we're talking about. We want to help them before they get into that crisis mode. So absolutely, we need to partner with the Office of School Safety and Security and with the other stakeholders, the School Boards Association, the Administrators Association, the Parents Association, and then work with that Office of School Safety. They are constantly in training. That's their number one job, to find out how to keep schools safe. So we work in partnership with them to create mental health awareness, programs where children can get help for trauma within our schools. I saw a great program happening up in Sandpoint where they actually have mental health folks from their community who have an office in the school and meet with children there. That's the kind of thing we need to work on to keep schools safe.
You bring up a good point that the issue of school safety is a lot broader than the school shooting idea. And unfortunately, we live in a world where that's a reality too. But in terms of bullying and suicide rates and all those other pieces that we can provide help in terms of creating that environment which is safe and safe and set up for success for our students.
Yes, schools have to be a haven for kids, and we know it is for many of our children. Mm-hmm. They come to school because they think that's a safer place for them.
Cindy, any final thoughts you'd like to share with the IEA members or others who will be casting their ballots in that superintendent's election?
Absolutely, yes. We know that the largest indicator of our students' success is to have a highly effective teacher. Our teachers are working harder than ever right now, but they have so many things that they are burdened with in moving students forward. How can we best help them to use their professional expertise with the flexibility that they desire and should have in their classrooms? That's what I want to do for Idaho educators.
One last thing, I'm going to ask you to put your civics teacher hat back on and talk about the responsibility, the duty, the obligation, the right, the opportunity, whatever terminology you want to put on it, for casting a ballot either on November 6th or through early balloting, but participating in the process.
If I didn't get out here and run for office and participate in this process, I would be a hypocrite, because for 33 years, that's what I've been advocating for my students to do. You be a part of the solution. You be a part of creating change in your life, in your profession, whatever it is. Teachers, administrators, school board members, parents, students, now's the time. Take a look at what's happening. Do we need change in Idaho education system? Yes. Please get out, support great candidates, and vote. Vote on November 6th.
Cindy, thank you very much.
Thank you. I love being part of the education program in Idaho.
That's Cindy Wilson, longtime IEA member and candidate for State Superintendent. Thank you very much for listening to this IEA Reporter podcast.